British Prime Minister Theresa May gave a speech after the terror attack in London. Let's see what she had to say.
First, while the recent attacks are not connected by common networks, they are connected in one important sense. They are bound together by the single evil ideology of Islamist extremism that preaches hatred, sows division, and promotes sectarianism. It is an ideology that claims our Western values of freedom, democracy, and human rights are incompatible with the religion of Islam. It is an ideology that is a perversion of Islam and a perversion of the truth. Defeating this ideology is one of the great challenges of our time, but it cannot be defeated through military intervention alone. It will not be defeated through the maintenance of a permanent defensive counter-terrorism operation, however skillful its leaders and practitioners. It will only be defeated when we turn people's minds away from this violence and make them understand that our values, pluralistic British values, are superior to anything offered by the preachers and supporters of hate. Second, we cannot allow this ideology the safe space it needs to breed. Yet that is precisely what the internet and the big companies that provide internet-based services provide. We need to work with allied democratic governments to reach international agreements that regulate cyberspace to prevent the spread of extremist and terrorism planning. And we need to do everything we can at home to reduce the risks of extremism online.
Are you kidding me? This is her response to the terror attack. She came out after the attack and she said this. She immediately jumps into, we got to deny this ideology a safe place or safe space online. The problem is the internet. I mean, we really got to regulate the internet to make sure that this problem, doesn't spread. This is authoritarianism 101. You take a serious issue like terrorism and people's security and you do a bait and switch. Like, oh yeah, that problem is really, really bad. Anyway, hand over more of your civil liberties and let me regulate your free speech and your free expression. But don't worry. We're only going to regulate the internet to try to stop terrorists. That's all we're going to do. No. This is the same thing that happened with the Patriot Act here in the NSA and our giant spying apparatus. Is they act like, oh, what? You're not in favor of this? I guess you're with the terrorists. I guess you don't want us to stop terrorism. Next time there's another 9/11, look in the mirror because it's your fault. But then they use this spying apparatus, this surveillance apparatus, to keep everybody in check and collect everybody's metadata and destroy your right to privacy and your protection from unreasonable search and seizure. The NSA, they were well known for what they called Love Int, which was short for Love Intelligence, which would mean people at the NSA were spying on all their ex-boyfriends and girlfriends if they work for the NSA. Why? Of course, because it's human nature. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. You give people the ability to spy on anybody at any time and collect everybody's metadata, they're going to do it. And that's exactly what happened. They did do it. And they abused their power. They abused it. So now they're taking this terrorist incident and they're using it to do the next step, which is what governments have wanted to do for years now. They're using it to say, well, look, we have to regulate the internet. We can't allow speech that's sympathetic to terrorism on the internet. By the way, how would you regulate that? What if somebody goes out there and says, oh, a lot of this is blowback. A lot of these attacks it's a backlash and it's revenge and retribution for fucked up Western foreign policy that killed people's aunts and uncles and radicalized people further. Is that something that under Theresa May's regulated internet somebody would be allowed to say? Or would that be considered, you're doing apologetics for jihadists? And that, you say stuff like that, maybe you're an enemy of the state. We're going to have to ban that. You're not allowed to say that. It's an unpopular opinion. We're not going to let you say that. You think it's really only going to be used for, we need to regulate the internet just to stop the terrorists. Well, no, then terrorist becomes, okay, we're going to use it to stop other crimes, not just terrorism now, other crimes, and eventually becomes drug crimes, that eventually becomes thought crimes. You know, as much as I despise a lot of outlets that spread actual fake news, that's the price you pay for freedom. There are going to be some people who are on the fringe who say preposterous things, but then, you know, you also get brilliant outlets, great outlets that do real journalism and real reporting that you'd never get in the mainstream media. Outlets like Truthdig or Truthout, or Democracy Now. What they would do is they would use this as a pretense to go against anybody that questions establishment power. So you start out by saying, hey, InfoWars, you know, you actually do a lot of fake news. You say Sandy Hook is a hoax and Obama's a literal demon, and WorldNet Daily thinks Obama's demonic, all that. So you start by saying, well, these guys, come on, what are we going to do? We got to get rid of them, not fake news. It goes from let's stop terrorists to let's stop them, and then it goes let's stop, you know, progressive, independent media who are holding people in the establishment accountable. So no, you don't give the government that much power because they will inevitably abuse it for their own good. And they'll try to suppress any information that makes them look bad too. If you allow them to regulate the internet like that, I mean, what do you think's going to happen? There's going to be a story about how, hey, look, Theresa May or Donald Trump just killed 100 civilians in a bombing that they did in Syria where they thought they were killing Al-Qaeda, and they killed women and children all over the place. They're going to make an argument that, no, we can't let that story be out there on the internet because then that would actually lead to some people being radicalized and turning to jihadist groups. So what are we going to do? We have to try to prevent the increase in these groups. I mean, that's the whole point, right? Is we're doing this to try to stop terrorism, so I'm going to have to ban the facts of this story and not allow this story out on the internet. It's such a bad idea, and it's so Orwellian, and it's so authoritarian, and she is fucking shameless to go out there and immediately make this point. And hilarious, she says she likes to play the fake tough guy approach of like, we need to call it by its name, Islamist extremism. Except, wait a second, you're not calling it by its name, because this isn't just Islamist extremism. This is Salafism. This is Wahhabism. Why don't you call it by that name? Why don't you call it by its more accurate name? You know, it's hilarious. People like Donald Trump and the right-wingers like to say it's radical Islamic terrorism or Islamist extremism. We're the ones who will keep it real, and the liberals are not going to keep it real. But hold on, you're not keeping it real. Because this isn't just broadly radical Islamic terrorism, because that would mean you're, you know, including fundamentalist Sunnis, but Shias too, and other, branches of Islam. But that's not what this is. This is very specifically Salafism. This is Wahhabism. This is jihadism. So, but you're not naming it that. Why aren't you naming it that? Oh, I don't know. Maybe because one of your top allies, one of the West's top allies is Saudi Arabia, the home of Salafism and Wahhabism. But they'd rather call it Islamist extremism, and they'd rather call it radical Islam, because then it's broad enough where they like to do the bait and switch from time to time of Iran is the #1 state sponsor of terror. Remember that? They always say that. Iran's the #1 state sponsor. Wait, what? No, they're not. No, they're not. It's not Shia suicide bombers. Iran is Shia. This isn't what we're dealing with here. The influx is Wahhabism and Salafism, ultra-fundamentalist Sunnis. But you can't say that. Why? Ooh, you don't want to affect the oil partner, the business partner. You know, Theresa May's doing, just like Donald Trump, doing business deals and weapons deals with Saudi Arabia, and then she's going to turn around and lecture you about terror. Let me tell you the problem here. We're going to fix it by regulating your free expression on the internet. How about we regulate it by you not arming Saudi Arabia anymore? By the West not arming the home of fundamentalism, the home of Wahhabism and Salafism, the home of the real radical Islamic terrorism. How about you stop arming and backing them? So these guys are they're shameless. They're fucking shameless. And then also another thing that we mentioned in the other segment, a lot of people in the UK are going to fight on the battlefield in Syria as rebels alongside jihadists, and then they come right back in the country. Wait, what? You want to talk about a failure of intelligence work? Now, that's not... You have to understand something, guys. That's not the same thing as like Trump saying, oh, we're a total and complete shutdown of Muslims coming in the U.S. Because that is a bigoted approach, because you're saying, hey, 1.5 billion people, 1.6 billion plus people, we're just going to treat you like you're Al-Qaeda. That's crazy. That's crazy. But when when somebody else says, hey, why don't we take an extra look and we should have a red flag next to all these people coming back from a country that has a hot war going on, a civil war going on, where they're all going to fight on the side of the rebels, where at least 60% of the rebels are jihadists. Hey, maybe a red flag and we don't let those people in the country. If you don't have a rigorous vetting process for those people, then that's just a failure of intelligence. It's not a sign of bigotry to say, hey, a double look at the fucking jackasses coming back from Syria. So you need better vetting. You need to stop arming and funding and backing Saudi Arabia and the people who are spreading this ideology. And furthermore, yes, we need to stop. The war on terror just hasn't worked. It's like the war on drugs. We waged the war on drugs. They say at the time, we're going to limit or eliminate the scourge of drug use. Well, now it's just as bad. It's equally as bad as it was, if not worse. So you failed. It didn't work. You're just wrong about, oh, this will happen if we do this, but that didn't happen, so you're just incorrect. What do you want me to tell you? You're wrong. Same thing with this. 2001, 2003, yeah, we're gonna do a war on terror. We're gonna, stop terror. Well, it's worse now. It's worse. You failed. What you did not work. And then every other day we get stories coming out of Syria, coming out of Iraq. Oh, whoops, look at that. We killed 100 civilians. Whoops, Donald Trump in his first military action as president killed a fucking 8-year-old American girl. This isn't working. This is making the problem worse. So yes, you have to switch up the way you do the war on terror. We've been doing military interventions out the wazoo. We're doing 7 different ones right now. So the answer is not military intervention. The answer is intelligence work. The answer is police work. The answer is letting the people in the region whose battle it is to fight the battle. Let the Syrian government fight the battle. Let Shia militias fight the battle. Let the Kurds fight the battle. Let them fight the people who are radical Islamists. That's what you do. You let them fight it. We can give them assistance. We can give them aid, humanitarian and otherwise. But yes, the main thing we need to do is just stop arming and backing the exporters of this ideology, the ones who spread it the most. And yes, increase the vetting process in Europe. Theirs isn't as good as the U.S. In the U.S., we have very solid, vetting process, multiple different government agencies involved, biometric screening, you name it. They check records, all that stuff. Interviews over and over. It takes like a year on average for somebody to get in here. There, it's less rigorous. So there's a lot of stuff that can be done. None of it is the Orwellian authoritarian approach that Theresa May is throwing out there, where she's saying, yeah, no, let's just regulate speech on the internet. How about that? Does that fool anybody at this point? Is anybody like, oh yeah, no, totally, it's a good idea, and I'm sure they're just going to use it for, the purest of intentions and the purest motives here, where they're only going to go after extremists. And by the way, how do you even determine that? Even among actual radical Islamists, how do you determine what's just somebody who's super fundamentalist who would never do an attack versus somebody who would do an attack? How do you, there's genuine free speech issues there too. It's like if you're online and somebody's a white nationalist versus a neo-Nazi, okay, is it illegal to be a white nationalist? No. Is it even illegal to be a neo-Nazi? No. What's illegal is if they were to carry out physical acts of violence against people, then that's illegal. If you just say, hey, the ideology's bad enough where we're going to arrest you for the ideology, that's a thought crime. That's a thought crime, and that's anti-freedom. And then you're no longer living in a free democracy which has free speech and free expression and freedom of the press. And so, how do you even if you have the purest of intentions and trying to regulate the internet to look out for terrorism and stuff, what do you do? What do you do? Hey, we're going to shut down the very conservative mosques. Okay, but then wouldn't you also want to shut down white nationalist enclaves? Super conservative and right-wing outlets in that respect? I mean, I'm just saying, if you want to open that door to, we're just going to shut it down if it's extreme sounding, well, what's the line between extreme sounding? What constitutes freedom of speech versus what's not freedom of speech? I mean, only really direct threats of violence. I'm going to kill this person at this time, at this place. That's against the law in the U.S., and that's against the law everywhere. But outside of that, what are you going to do? I don't know. This is profoundly against civil liberties and civil rights and freedom of expression, which are the things that the West ironically holds up as the beacon of what makes us great. But here's Theresa May saying, no, let's just regulate the internet in response to this because shutting down people's free expression and free speech, that's a good thing. I'm sure that'll work out for the best. No, it's not going to prevent any attacks like this. It's not going to move us in the right direction in any way. It's just going to take away people's freedoms, and you're doing it under the guise of protecting people.